John, sometimes I have the same problem. All right, this could be the day that President Trump and Republicans have been waiting for. The GOP tax overhaul making its way through the House this afternoon and likely the Senate tonight. This would hand the president his first major legislative victory. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith, and here today, Harris Faulkner, townhall.com editor Katie Pavlich, former Deputy State Department spokesperson Marie Harf, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy Fox News contributor and nationally syndicated radio talk show host Kevin Jackson is here, and he is outnumbered. And if the tease was not evidence and our lead-in just now, everybody's kind of feeling the holiday spirit around.
Yeah.
Why not?
You know?
I mean, we got a tax bill that's about to come through. We got, sorry, Marie, but we've got the left on the ropes. And I think America, yeah, I think America's
We're the ones who keep winning elections.
Hey.
Oh, the party started early.
All right, let's get it started. The House set to vote in the next hour. Republicans say this bill will produce the most far-reaching overhaul of this country's tax code in decades. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says his chamber will vote on it tonight after it passes the House. President Trump is predicting that this bill will add fuel to the nation's economic engine. Tweeting this morning, stocks and the economy have a long way to go after the tax cut bill is totally understood and appreciated in its scope and size. Biggest tax cuts and reform ever passed. Enjoy and create many beautiful jobs. And less than 1 week from Christmas Day, Democrats believe the bill is a big lump of coal for America's middle class. The White House could not disagree more.
Today is a huge day, not just for the White House, not just for Congress, but most importantly for America, especially middle-class Americans who are going to see the biggest benefit out of this tax package.
Big tax cuts for the very wealthy, big tax cuts for corporations, tax hikes for millions of folks in the middle class, and small tax cuts and temporary for everybody else. That is not putting America first, and it's certainly not putting the middle class first.
Peter Ducey is covering it all on a very exciting day on Capitol Hill. Hey, Peter.
Sandra, here's how confident House Republicans are that they have the votes to pass. Excuse me. All right, we're just doing a live shot really quick. Excuse me. You can see that obviously there are two protesters here so far. We're just going to swing it on over here this way. Excuse me. Thank you very much.
People with developmental disabilities. This tax bill is a scam. It's gonna
Peter, we've got you, and we've got that there's some things going on there. We'll hopefully get back to you in just a bit. But this is a historic day, Kevin Jackson. Can you kick this off for us?
I love it. Look, we won. This is exactly what we wanted to happen. And the difference between what we're witnessing now versus with Barack Obama trying to pass Obamacare is you have a track record of success. You've got a stock market going through the roof. You've got consumer confidence that's through the roof. You've got a GDP that's now 2 quarters at 3% that Obama was not able to accomplish. And now I saw the New York Fed yesterday said that they expect it to go to 4. So you're watching Donald Trump's processes go to work, cutting the red tape, working on trade deals, putting America first. And I know it sounds all trite, but he's living up to expectations. So it's very difficult for somebody to say, this can't work. Well, we didn't think Obamacare couldn't work, and it didn't. And so now we've got something, a track record of success, and somebody that says, just let this happen, and you'll watch this economy continue to boom.
Can I ask one question before? I know you guys are going to kind of battle it out here over the politics, because that's what we do. But I'm just curious, when you say that you have a track record and you look at the number of Americans in recent surveys who say that they are against this bill, I think they get a voice in the track record too, right? So I understand what you're saying, wait till next year, but what do you say to them going into Christmas? And many of them are not in the categories of the people that you just listed.
By the way, I don't think that the polls reveal that they're against the bill. I think a lot of the polls show that they believe their taxes won't go down as a result.
So they don't believe it. But some of them I've seen, they don't like it.
The fact of the matter is we shouldn't even be looking at polls. We've looked at polls on Hillary Clinton winning. They were bogus. We looked at polls on Donald Trump's likability and all these other things. But you look at things that he's done and ask the average American, and those polls numbers, they differ dramatically.
And there was a joking moment at the GOP conference, the weekly news conference that happened this morning, where Paul Ryan sort of said he was going to defer to a poll when asked a question. Because they say that the unpopularity of this bill is largely because of misinformation that is put out there by the media. But it has not been that popular. But one of the things you hear most often from Paul Ryan is neither were Reagan-era tax cuts. It was not popular before that passed.
Yeah, but if you look at reporting at the local level and you ask people on the street how they feel about their taxes going down, which Republicans argue and tax foundations from the left to the right agree with that assessment, they will say, of course, I want to be keeping more of my own money so I can provide what I feel is best for my family. And when you look at the overall economic picture for the Trump administration, tax reform really is the cherry on top of a really good year economically, which has been a story that has been undercovered across the board in terms of mainstream media. And President Trump, I think, gets credit for setting a deadline. He wanted this done by Christmas, and it looks like it's going to happen, but 5-6 days before Christmas time. And in Washington, D.C., deadlines are something that are usually guidelines instead of hard deadlines.
And not only,
this time
we're not even going up to the end of the week right now. I mean, the Senate, they're saying that there's going to be a vote tonight in the Senate, not even getting pushed into tomorrow, Marie.
Yes, I think we will see it pass tonight, but we all need to remember that a lot of the reason people are skeptical is this is almost the opposite of what President Trump promised on the campaign trail and when he first put this tax plan forward. He promised it would be focused on the middle class, that there would be a corporate reduction and a wealthy reduction at the top end of the brackets, but he said this will be focused on the middle class. That is not the case.
It is.
Do you remember?
Absolutely true.
Do you remember that?
true.
Well, it is not true because the middle class tax cuts expire and the corporate tax cuts don't expire. So just in terms of that one fact, it seems like we care more about the corporate rate. Let me finish before you jump in, please. And the other problem is the more people learn about the bill, the less they like it.
Really, like Obamacare. The more
why do you keep comparing to
because
Obamacare? That is no part of this conversation.
That's a perfect.
We're talking about a
segue.
tax bill.
No, it's a,
do you
no,
remember
it's a
when Paul
segue.
Ryan stood up with that postcard and said, we're all going to be able to do our taxes on this? The tax code has not been simplified. That promise is way out.
I will say that they have not done exactly what they thought they would do.
Okay,
Sandra,
great.
you brought up multiple times that this is a 3% growth tax bill when they talked about 6 or 7% growth. That is true. We're not going to be able to do our taxes on a postcard. However, when you look at across the board the numbers, 80% of the middle class is going to see a tax cut. For a family of four, $70,000 a year coming into the household, that's $2,000 a year that they can use towards what they think is best. They are going to get a tax cut.
Doom and gloom is what's always predicted by the left. When Trump got elected, the economy was going to crowbar. The tax bill, now it's not going to affect everybody. The Barack Obama administration promised that we were going to have our lower payments for Obamacare. We're going to keep our doctors, et cetera. It was nonsense. So Trump doesn't have to live up to 100% of the promises that he made. What he needs to live up to is the fact that he's getting it done.
I judge politicians against their promises, and I think all voters should.
But one of the things that nobody ever talks about when they want to compare the journey with tax bill versus Obamacare in the beginning, remember how long it took to just get the sign-up website to work?
Yeah.
It was a disaster and even the White House was admitting at that point, this is a disaster we rolled out on our hands. We got to fix this. People couldn't even sign up. But I did want to say this because I want to press in and make sure that the messaging is clear here. People have said in surveys that they are against this bill.
Yes.
55% in a recent CNN Wall Street Journal poll, I believe.
Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, and I mean, but they both have looked, and other people have looked at this along the way too. But I understand what you're saying, too. It comes down to how the questions are asked and when. And so that's why I said your answer of let's wait and see what happens, then let's do some immediate polling. Because some people do look at the polling.
But it was Katie's point earlier that, you can, all the things that these guys are talking about in terms of what D.C. wants. You go to the street and ask somebody, do you want your taxes lowered? Yes.
Is
it going to impact?
And I get it. But Harris, I think an important point to make, and this is what Paul Ryan was saying before, are they against the tax bill and the actual contents of it?
They didn't get
enough? Are they against what they have been fed as far as the information that has been put out to them? Are they against the actual
I don't know what they
content
watch, but
of the bill?
Well, maybe we should have had a congressional hearing. There were 0 congressional hearings held on a bill that will impact every American. I think that's malpractice.
Hearings are a waste of time.
Okay. Exactly. Spoken like a true bureaucrat.
That was the opposite people said about Obamacare.
It is on the day that they're voting,
it's
right?
It's a conversation everybody's having at home as well, because a lot of people don't understand it, and that's right. That's been a flaw of Republicans, Kevin. They haven't sold this thing like they could. All right, we'll see where it goes. In less than 2 hours, the House Intelligence Committee is set to interview Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe. He's at the center of several controversies swirling around the agency, from the Hillary Clinton investigation to the surveillance of the Trump campaign and new allegations of anti-Trump bias inside the FBI? Are investigators breaking new ground or going on a fishing expedition? We will debate. Plus, White House lawyers set to meet with special counsel Robert Mueller's team. What does this mean for that investigation? That's ahead.
Fox News Alert. In less than 2 hours, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe is set to testify behind closed doors with the House Intelligence Committee. They're expected to ask the FBI's number 2 person about a lot, including Peter Strzok. Strzok is the DOJ official booted off Robert Mueller's Russia investigation several months ago. Strzok sent anti-Trump text messages to an alleged mistress, FBI lawyer Lisa Page. One of those text messages reads, quote, "I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office," we believe that's Andrew McCabe, "that there's no way he gets elected. But I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. End quote. Congressman Trey Gowdy will be among those leading the questions today. He wants to get to the bottom of that particular text message, among some other things.
Andrew McCabe cuts across every facet of every investigation in 2016 that your viewers are interested in, from Secretary Clinton's email to the investigation into the Trump campaign. He's the deputy director of the FBI. So there are a ton of questions, including the one you made reference to, the meeting between Agent Strzok and Lisa Page in, quote, Andy's office. We need to make sure that was Andy McCabe. And if they were coming up with a, quote, insurance policy in case Donald Trump won, that is devastating.
Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Chuck Grassley reportedly says he wants the FBI to replace Andrew McCabe. All right, so we got to get to the bottom of whether Andy was Andrew McCabe. A, B, what else do you want to know?
Well, I think they're going to say, what was his intent, right? Because that's exactly what former FBI Director Comey said when he was letting Hillary Clinton off the hook. And his intent, regardless of whether it was an assassination attempt or whatever, was definitely something.
Whoa.
Well, no, I'm just saying, we don't know what it was. When you say we've got to make sure that this guy, doesn't get in at all costs, what does that mean? So I'm saying there's a spectrum of what does it mean. But one thing that we know for sure is that he was plotting in an election against a candidate, and there's FBI fingerprints all over this.
All right, because I know how things get clipped on social media, I just want to make sure that we press in on the fact that no one has floated any sort of an idea that. Oh,
it's been floated. When I talk about this, I'm talking about social media stuff and that's out there. I'm not talking about media.
Nothing
sources.
credible.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Okay, so I think the bigger question is what comes out of asking Andrew McCabe questions. What will we learn about this?
Exactly. And I'm actually glad that it's a closed conversation, because I think that everyone then, you can take politics out of it a little bit, not entirely, but when there's not TV cameras there, they can have a conversation about all of these different issues. There have been a lot of accusations and allegations leveled against the FBI. We've talked about a lot of them here. There are so many people that work there, including on these investigations, who are career officers, who are respected, who serve both parties, no matter who is in the White House. That needs to remain at the core of how we see the FBI. And Andy McCabe today will have a chance to answer lawmakers' questions without having the cameras there, which makes it a little more political, I think.
Definitely fanfare and congressmen and women trying to get their time on cable news networks.
Get a campaign ad cut.
Right. But there are a lot of questions that he's going to have to answer today. The first question is, were they in your office discussing this insurance policy? Right. Were they there? If they were there, why were you allowing them to use a federal government taxpayer-funded office to discuss going after a political candidate that they didn't like? And what was done after that meeting? Was there a follow-up meeting to discuss the insurance policy that happened? Were you engaging with them on how to carry this policy out? And what are your connections to the Clinton Foundation, considering your wife had deep connections to Terry McAuliffe, who was a friend of the Clintons, and took money from them in a Virginia race? I mean, it gets very complicated, but the question that they're going to want answered is, what was the plan to carry out that insurance policy, and was it connected to the Russia investigation?
More broadly, he's going to have to defend whether or not there was a political bias, an anti-Trump bias inside of the FBI while this investigation was ongoing. Maria, I put you on the spot to say, do you think that there is?
I don't. I think there are a lot of FBI officers, including many people working on the investigations, that probably voted for Donald Trump and are Republicans. Some of them clearly didn't. We have seen no evidence yet that, however people politically felt on a personal level, that impacted any of these investigations. Let me finish. FBI officials are allowed to have personal opinions. Was he stupid for putting these in text?
They had the meeting, but they had the meeting in McCabe's office.
We need the question is still open. There has been no evidence showing this impacted.
That's absolutely ridiculous.
But if you let your opinion cloud the way you do your job is the question. So on the table, along with the list of things that Katie asked is, Mr. McCabe, did you know about those text messages among your employees? What would you have considered on board and not on board, considering that that was...
No, he knew.
There are two venues where this played out. This played out in text messages off duty, right, between these two federal agents.
But he may have
on
known.
Official phones.
Really
but then they had the meeting in FBI headquarters about the insurance policy, and that's the question. Why are we using the power of the FBI to go after a political candidate?
Kevin,
we don't know.
You get the last word.
I just want to say the FBI, the grassroots level, at the general level, are very, these are people that want to do the right thing. At the top, we have seen corruption. End of story. There is no question about that, whether it's McCabe and all the other players, certainly James Comey. We've seen it.
So bottom line.
So this idea that, the general public knows this, and the bottom line is somebody has to answer for this.
All right.
But we're not impugning the entire organization.
All right, it's behind closed doors with the Intel Committee, but of course, as it makes news and we learn about it, we'll tell you first. Meanwhile, White House lawyers are gearing up to meet with special counsel Robert Mueller's office later this week. The Washington Post is reporting that meeting could trigger a new, more contentious phase between the two sides. People with knowledge of the investigation tell the paper Mueller's probe has yet to show signs of slowing down and could last well into 2018. White House lawyers have stated publicly that Mueller's done with White House interviews and document requests. So that would be oppositional. The Post is reporting those lawyers plan to ask Mueller's investigators if they need any more information, hoping the probe as related to the president will soon be over. Kevin?
I think that Mueller's going to ask for a pardon. I just can't imagine he's got any.
Wait a minute, what?
He hasn't committed a crime.
How did we get there?
I'm just saying, I believe that asking for this is more of an olive branch to the Trump administration. I don't believe for a second that anything more is going to come out of this than already has. He should, if he were.
So doesn't it behoove the president just let it play out? There's no evidence.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, golly, you get to
The short answer, yes. And I think that's what Donald Trump did. Look, everybody was mad when Mueller started stacking the deck with all these Hillary Clinton supporters, and people were angry that President Trump didn't say anything. And I said at the time, he's letting him stack the deck. If you're not guilty, stack the deck all you want.
But the White House is asking a very important question. Does this investigation need to continue with taxpayer money and all these resources and time spent when there's still no evidence of any wrongdoing or collusion? How can they continue doing this, Marie, when they're not coming up with anything? And the White House wants to ask that question.
Well, I don't think it's fair to say they're not coming up with anything. They have 4 indictments. 2 of those are guilty pleas. Through this investigation, we have learned that the Russian government reached out to the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign met with the Russian government. They then were not fully forthcoming about those meetings. I'm not saying there was collusion, but we have learned more about the Trump campaign's interactions with the Russian government.
Well, that wasn't the purpose of the investigation, first of all.
But they're not done with their investigation. For every American who cares about Russian interference in our election, there's no harm in letting this investigation play out fully and making sure we run down every single lead. And Bob Mueller, you respond to that.
Look, if you're correct, if Americans are concerned, which they are, about Russian meddling in our elections and elections in Europe, then they would hope that the Mueller investigation would focus on the original intention, which was investigating collusion. The 4 indictments that you mentioned have nothing to do with collusion, vote changing, working with the Russian government to change votes. It was about lying. It was about lying to the FBI about a conversation with a Russian ambassador during the transition campaign, which is a normal conversation to have. And the other Manafort indictment and his business partner were about his own business dealings. So in terms of what we have moving forward and getting this ball rolling and coming to an end, we still don't know a lot about the investigation. We can let it play out. But in terms of the original goal, they are far from it.
All right, real quickly, Kevin, before we move on, it really behooves the White House to see this through.
Yes.
I think. But Sandra brings up a good point. $7.5 million for, of taxpayer money for no evidence. But if we're close to the end, maybe it makes more sense for the president not to interfere, let it play out, and then it never comes up again.
Well, I think that
because Democrats are not going to let it go.
The money notwithstanding, we all can agree with that.
Marie says she's not.
But
you kill the investigation.
Leftists will spend money on things like that because it's their witch hunt. But the problem is it's going to spin back on Podesta. It's going to spin back on the Clinton campaign, the Clinton Foundation.
Well, apparently Democrats are willing to risk that because there have been.
Let them do it.
And look at the flip side too. And I'm not saying that these two things are necessarily commensurate with the idea of a special counsel today. But, you've got Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who could turn an eye to Hillary Clinton and look into some of the things.
He will.
With the anti-Trump dossier that was put together by a British spy and handed over to
Fusion
the FBI.
GPS
And Fusion, right. I mean, so there is some meat on the bone for
Absolutely there will be. So go for it.
All right.
Let's spend a little more money on that.
Okay, they are talking about our money right now. They're debating the tax bill on the floor of the House. Look at how quickly this is moving along.
Kevin Brady, Ways and Means Committee Chair, just spoke briefly and said the GOP is delivering on their promise.
This is a huge day, and we know that we will hear shortly from the House Speaker, Paul Ryan, who will take to the floor after this debate is come to a conclusion. Again, now they are debating, and you may wonder, well, does that mean that the discussion is over? The text of the bill is done. It is ready for vote. We understand that will happen within the next 90 minutes, if not sooner than that, according to published reports. Sandra?
Well, and we're still on track to have the Senate vote on this tonight, but fair warning, it could get late. So watch it pass in the House. If it does, it gets kicked to the Senate for a late night vote.
Huge day. And after the tax bill is done, Congress will need to pass a budget bill to avert a shutdown of the government as their Friday deadline is almost here. Can they get that done in time? All of Congress, not just one party or the other. They're going to have to work together on this. Oh boy, what the political fallout could look like if they don't get it done. Stay close. Well, we have fresh information now emerging in the fatal Amtrak train derailment in Washington state. Now federal officials are confirming the train was going 50 miles per hour above the speed limit that was posted for that part of the track when it careened off an overpass. At least 3 people are dead and dozens injured.
Hey guys, what happened?
We were coming around the corner to take the bridge over I-5 there, right north into Squally, and we went on the ground.
Okay, is everybody okay?
I'm still figuring that out. We got cars everywhere and down onto the highway.
All right, I want to take you now, before we go to our reporter, to these live pictures. They are moving one of the cars off the tracks. Remember yesterday when this happened, one had careened off that overpass, flattened out. Another was precariously perched for hours. And then you had some cars that were out of sight, upside down in the woods. And now we can see that they are making headway in terms of moving these cars out of the way. Claudia Cowan is live now with more. Claudia?
Well, Harris, as you mentioned, there is a lot of activity here at the site of yesterday morning's derailment as investigators work to find a cause and as these highway officials try to get this stretch of Interstate 5 back in service. You know, a 4 or 5 mile section of this very busy freeway has now been closed for more than 24 hours because of all the wreckage. But crews using cranes and other heavy equipment have hauled several train cars away on flatbed trucks. They need to remove a few more and make sure the road is safe before they can reopen the freeway to traffic. Meantime, speed is emerging as a possible cause or contributor to this derailment that left 3 dead and injured dozens of others. Investigators say the Amtrak train was going nearly triple the speed limit.
The preliminary information shows it was going 80 miles per hour. We don't know exactly why that's happening yet, and we don't know the speed profile for the whole territory, which is something we need to find out.
The tracks, which had been used by freight trains for years, had recently undergone a $181 million upgrade to enable high-speed passenger service between Seattle and Portland. In fact, yesterday was the train service's inaugural run. Though positive train control, which can automatically slow or stop a speeding train, was not in use on this stretch of track, and one local mayor had predicted there would be fatalities with these trains traveling so close to traffic and to pedestrians. In a statement, Amtrak said, quote, "At this time, we will not speculate about the cause, and we encourage others not to speculate as well. But people are going to want answers, and they're going to want them soon, Harris, as to why this train was traveling more than 50 miles over the speed limit. Back to you.
Yeah, we have upwards of 70 people hospitalized yet, so a lot of answers need to be answered quickly, a lot of questions. Thank you, Claudia.
And this Fox News alert: a government shutdown looming on Capitol Hill as Congress approaches its deadline of this Friday to pass a spending bill. House GOP leaders plan to vote later this week on a bill they know is dead on arrival in the Senate. If the Senate sends back a clean continuing resolution, House Republicans will likely need help from Democrats to pass it. This as many Dems threaten to withhold support for any version of the budget bill that does not protect those so-called dreamers brought here illegally as children. Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono tweeting, "I will vote against a continuing resolution that does not include the DREAM Act. Instead of doing anything that would actually help people, Republicans want to give huge tax cuts to the rich." Talk about misplaced priorities. Republican Senator John Kennedy pushing back on those demands.
I don't think we'll have trouble keeping the government open over Christmas time. Now, having said that, and I don't want to see government shut down. Having said that, I will vote shut down government in a heartbeat if they try to stuff something into the legislation that shouldn't be there. If they try to make me swallow, for example, immigration, if they wanted to add immigration reform to it, I doubt it would be immigration reform. It would be some special interest a provision about immigration, such as DACA. I think DACA ought to be considered separately. I wouldn't vote for the bill.
So as usually the conversation goes with whether there will be a shutdown or won't there, the discussion becomes whose fault would it be if there was?
Well, you know, it's going to be, we play this game every time depending on who's in office. If it was Obama in office, the Democrats would be for, doing whatever that they would decide in any other way. So I think the bigger issue, though, in terms of this is why are we hinging this agreement on DACA when we should be hinging this agreement on getting veterans off the streets and getting them employed and stopping suicides? But the Democrats are hinging this thing on an immigration piece that, quite frankly, should be voted separately.
Katie?
Look, I think that the DACA issue is too complicated to just stuff into a continuing resolution. It is something that the majority of the country supports. It's something that President Trump rightfully kicked over to Congress because it was done illegally under President Obama through the executive branch. However, it's too complicated in terms of what year do you make the cutoff for when you were brought here as a child? What kind of benefits do you get? What kind of status do you get? Do you then become an American citizen, or do you simply get to be a permanent resident? It's too complicated to just insert into the continuing resolution. That being said, I don't doubt that Democrats will maybe try and toss it in there as a political bomb to try and blow things up in President Trump's face, especially after they've seen this tax reform bill go through and they kind of want to push back and get another victory against him before the end of the year.
You know, Democrats have to be careful here because they're risking getting some real legislation on an issue, Marie, that, and I say specifically to you because you were with the administration last, that the Obama administration left as an open question mark. You know, DACA never had any sort of a future beyond a certain point. We have to solve this now for the people in this country through that program, Dreamers. So what do we do? And it deserves a real look. And what House members have told me that I've talked with on Overtime and Beyond is that they are willing to look at keeping the nuclear family here. There are some discussions now about keeping people here that Republicans weren't having before. And so Democrats really missed the opportunity. It may not be in the middle. I think we oversell that sometimes, but maybe there's a nugget that we can get to where they all agree, and then the program has life for a period of time. It goes away and is replaced by something different, better. I don't know.
Well, I hope that happens. President Trump forced Congress's hand.
It can't happen before Christmas. So is your party willing to bend?
We'll see. I think they could also compromise and push for funding for the Children's Health Insurance Program to fund CHIP, which, hundreds of thousands of children across this country get their health insurance through that program. It needs to be funded. That's a priority, too. Democrats are concerned that if we don't push DACA now, we're never going to get it, because of some of the rhetoric, because of some of what people have said.
If that's the case, then they should stop lobbing fire over at Republicans about tax reform, because they've got bicameral majority right now. So it's their time.
Well, we just can't shut down the
government.
The president laying out his national security strategy for the coming year, and it was very much putting America first. Democrats slamming it as isolationist, but It was a campaign theme that propelled the president to victory. How it might take shape and if it will work, we shall debate that.
Lots of reaction to a major address by President Trump yesterday, the commander-in-chief unveiling his administration's national security strategy. The speech making it clear that this White House has a very different worldview than past administrations by putting America first. And he also touted one of his primary campaign promises.
This strategy recognizes that we cannot secure a nation if we do not secure our borders. So for the first time ever, American strategy now includes a serious plan to defend our homeland. It calls for the construction of a wall on our southern border, ending chain migration and the horrible visa and lottery programs.
The president also making a point of using language that President Obama would not, especially when it comes to fighting terrorism.
Our strategy calls for us to confront, discredit, and defeat radical Islamic terrorism and ideology, and to prevent it from spreading into the United States.
But for some Democrats, the chief concerns seem to be, of course, Russia.
Russia deliberately tried to interfere in our elections, that they have a propaganda campaign that is detrimental to our interests. President Trump just can't say it. He still embraces Mr. Putin. So he cannot acknowledge what Russia did here in the United States and what he's doing, continuing to do in Europe. And that's a fundamental problem we have with President Trump.
Kevin, I want to go to you first on Trump's immigration aspect of this, and then I want to get to Marie on the Iran aspect of it. What do you think about him putting the immigration aspect into his national security strategy?
I think it's a big part of it. I mean, we have people that are coming across a porous border, and it's definitely disrupted the safety of Americans. I mean, we just watched an incident where Kate Steinle was killed by an illegal and was exonerated, and there have been many other aspects of that. They've emptied prisons during the time of Obama and let people back on the streets because we have these false notion of sanctuary cities that actually don't exist in America because we have laws. But I want to make one point about this situation with Russia, that the comment that this guy made. It's ridiculous. Donald Trump is ready to deal with Russia. In fact, he just initiated policies that just were pro-Russian, and the Democrats are silent on that. This is a guy who's going to look at America in every aspect fairly, but it's going to be in a pro-American policy in the end.
And if you look at the 69-page document that they did put out, they do acknowledge that Russia and China are adversaries trying to redo the world order. And they do admit, Marie, that the Russians did have some influence in terms of propaganda in the election.
That's what's so interesting. The written document that you reference is a little bit at odds with the tone of President Trump's speech. The written document is actually in some ways fairly conventional, right? It talks about China, talks about Russia as rising powers, as growing threats. I was disappointed that it didn't talk about human rights more. The U.S. has traditionally, in a bipartisan way, played a leadership role there. But for me, this written document, which I actually think isn't that bad, will only hold up and be, as good until the first tweet.
What did you like about the president's speech?
That undercuts it. I mean, I didn't think there was a whole lot in that speech that I liked. I know that's surprising. I think the overall strategy, again, in parts of it, it takes a conventional look at the threats we face. But his speech was focused on a whole host of other things. And it didn't lay out, I don't think, beyond slogans, how we're going to look at North Korea. Did any of us hear that yesterday?
But the document did. So I think, the speech is one thing.
But the document is only as good.
And the national security team. But Harris
is only as good as the implementation. And by decimating the State Department, by putting diplomacy on the back burner.
I think that they've decimated ISIS. But my question for Harris is,
a lot of this,
the administration, unlike the Obama administration, has been very focused on Iran and their role in the Middle East as a bad actor rather than appeasing them like the Obama administration did. And that is a huge policy shift when it comes to how we work with the Saudis, with the Egyptians, with the Israelis, and how we handle the humanitarian crisis in Yemen.
One of the things that's been publicly different between the two administrations with regard to what you're saying is the hunger and the thirst for evidence that Iran is a bad actor. Maybe we were looking for it under the Obama administration, but the actual finding of it, the way that we saw Ambassador Nikki Haley lay it out at the UN and invite other countries to come here and take a look at the poster with all the areas, the warehouses where Iran is put basically with a Made in Iran sticker, as she said, on its weaponry that it's giving Yemen to fight a proxy war. I mean, those are the types of things that give you texture and give you color in your argument and get the American people with you. We didn't see the Obama administration do anything like that necessarily.
We sanctioned them over that repeatedly and often.
It's a new day, so we'll see what happens. Moving along, as the House marks up legislation to put a stop to sexual harassment, some Democrats are reportedly saying they regret urging Al Franken to resign over accusations against him. They think he should go through the Ethics Committee investigation before making his next move. Whether they're right or are they going to lose steam in their effort to gain the moral high ground on the issue.